Houlahan Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
Direct to you from Interstate 70's Exit 24 in Grain Valley, Missouri. OOIDA, the only national organization representing professional truckers, presents Landline Now.
For drivers, being told to hold it or being forced to go outside because a shipper or receiver won't let you use their restroom is a common occurrence. A new piece of legislation looks to put a stop to that. One of the bill's sponsors, U.S. Representative Houlahan of Pennsylvania, joins the show to talk about the bipartisan Trucker Bathroom Access Act. From the rising cost of running a trucking operation to an effort to get more women into trucking, S.J. Munoz and Jamie Jones will tell us who in recent news has been good and who's been bad with some roses and raspberries. And finally, our series celebrating OOIDA's 50th anniversary continues with a look at what the association is doing right now to fight back against those trying to get bigger, heavier trucks on our nation's roadways. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Brian. Our top story today, Julie Su's chances of being confirmed as the next U.S. Secretary of Labor have taken another hit. In a statement posted to Twitter, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia said he plans to vote against Su's confirmation bid. Manchin, a Democrat, said she's too progressive to work successfully with both parties. Su, currently serving as acting labor secretary, was nominated for the post by President Biden in February and went through a confirmation hearing in April, but her bid has yet to come up for a vote in the full Senate. The White House says it will forge ahead, though. Politico quotes White House officials as saying they will continue to fight for Su's confirmation and called out Senators Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona for not supporting her nomination. Much of the opposition towards Su stems from her role in the implementation of California's Assembly Bill 5, a controversial law that makes it extremely difficult for a worker to be considered an independent contractor. The co-sponsor of a bill that would make it easier for truck drivers to gain access to restrooms while on the job is hopeful about it passing. U.S. Representative Houlahan told Landline that this isn't just about common decency, but also about the greater supply chain.
It was brought to my attention when we were struggling, frankly, with recruiting truckers, and that this was one very simple and very pragmatic way that we could address that issue by trying to make sure that the quality of life and the working conditions were improved for our truckers.
Representative Houlahan co-sponsors the Trucker Bathroom Access Act alongside Representative Troy Nehls of Texas. H.R. 3869 wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime, as it only requires restrooms that already exist be made available to truck drivers who are doing business with shippers and receivers.
So we're not asking people to spend any more money, businesses to do anything, as you mentioned, that would require an output of money or a burden on the business. And so it is sort of confounding. And sometimes I feel as though organizations sometimes are looking for, an opportunity to battle one another. This just feels like a no-brainer to me, and I'm really, really hopeful. Another important.
Check out our full conversation with Representative Houlahan a little later on in today's program. T-Force Freight has announced a tentative renewed collective bargaining agreement with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Union. The new 5-year agreement is subject to ratification by the employees, which is expected to occur soon, according to a company statement. The contract was set to expire on July 31st, and the union's 8,000 members had already authorized a strike vote. T-Force Freight is the new name for UPS Freight, which was acquired by T-Force Freight's parent company in early 2021. Meanwhile, the union remains in negotiations with Yellow, which is struggling financially and trying to restructure its business. Yellow has sued the Teamsters, alleging breach of contract. A nearly 2-week strike at ports in British Columbia has come to an end. Thousands of workers walked off the job at Vancouver and Prince Rupert earlier this month due to a labor dispute between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union and British Columbia Maritime Employers Association. The two sides reached a deal on Thursday and operations resumed as normal that same day. The Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Trade Group estimates the 13-day strike caused daily trade disruptions amounting to about 8.6 billion Canadian dollars. The percentage of diesel-powered trucks emitting close to zero emissions is up across the U.S. The data comes from a report by the Diesel Technology Forum. 57% of trucks on the road last year were near-zero-emission trucks, defined as those with advanced diesel technology manufactured in or after 2010. That's up more than 10 percentage points from a year earlier. The vast majority of Class 8 commercial trucks on the road are still powered by diesel. The report said nearly 97% run on advanced diesel technology, just about 1% on compressed natural gas, and 0.2% are electric. Administrators for Miami-Dade County made a mistake that will cost the county about $18 million. The Miami Herald reports the county forgot to renew a local fuel tax before a required deadline, meaning the tax won't be applied starting August 31st through the end of the year. The mayor's office says the 4-month stoppage will result in a 6-cent discount for consumers of gas and diesel and a loss of about $18 million for the county. They plan to dip into leftover COVID-19 stimulus dollars from the federal government to cover the losses. A new report from AAA says communities that raise speed limits aren't doing drivers any favors. The report looked at 12 major roadways across the U.S. 6 had their speed limits raised recently. The other 6 had them lowered. And what the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety report found was that those roads with higher speed limits led to higher crash rates, while those with lower limits saw rates go down. The study also says the increased speeds had little effect on saving time or helping with traffic flow. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says some 84,000 people were killed in traffic crashes in 2021 and 2022. NHTSA says speeding was a factor in nearly a third of all of them. More than 80 miles of the Pennsylvania Turnpike will be shut down this weekend while crews clean up after a crash. WTAJ News reports that Turnpike authorities say the westbound lanes will be closed between the Breezewood exit and New Stanton interchange starting at 11 p.m. on Saturday. The closure is scheduled to run for about 6 hours through 5 a.m. on Sunday. That should give crews enough time to remove a tractor-trailer that crashed earlier this week in the area. The driver of that truck was charged with DUI. Detours will be posted. Expect delays. Law enforcement in Texas is reminding commercial truck drivers about the federal regulations surrounding alcohol. In a Facebook post, the Grapevine Police Department said they recently placed a trucker out of service after finding several cans of beer during an inspection. That's a violation of FMCSA regulations, which prohibits even unopened cans or bottles in the cab. That driver was sidelined for 24 hours. This is at least the second social media post in as many weeks, reminding truckers about the law. Last week, the Iowa State Patrol shared a similar story with a similar reminder. And finally, CVSA's Operation Safe Driver Week is nearly over. It's set to end on Saturday, meaning law enforcement throughout North America will be out in greater force for one more day, keeping a close eye out for dangerous driving behaviors. That includes drivers distracted by their phones, tailgating, and this year's focus of speeding. During last year's campaign, CVSA says officers in Canada and the U.S. pulled over more than 35,000 vehicles and issued more than 26,000 warnings and citations. The results from this week's Operation Safe Driver Week should come out sometime this fall. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. If a carrier, shipper, receiver, or broker tries to coerce you into violating the regulations, document the coercive act, then either call 1-888-DOT-SAFT or file a complaint online to the National Consumer Complaint Database. Again, that's 1-888-DOT-SAFT. If you'd like to join OOIDA, you can do it at a discount. Just call the membership department during business hours at 816-229-5791. You can join the association or renew your membership for 2 years for $50, a $40 discount. Next, a new piece of legislation aims to put an end to drivers being denied restroom access. One of the bill's sponsors, U.S. Representative Chrissy Houlahan of Pennsylvania, joins the show to talk about the Bipartisan Trucker Bathroom Access Act. I'm Ryan Witkowski, and this is Landline Now.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. course, I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now, welcome back. A piece of legislation that would guarantee that truck drivers are allowed access to restrooms at the places they pick up and deliver from was recently reintroduced in the U.S. House. H.R. 3869 is beautiful in its simplicity, and it wouldn't cost U.S. taxpayers a dime. The bipartisan bill has 2 representatives on board already, Representative Troy Nehls of Texas, and our next guest, Representative Chrissy Houlahan of Pennsylvania, who joins us on the line now. Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine is here, too, to help guide this conversation along. Let's get right to it, Congresswoman, by talking about the problem this bill seeks to fix. The lack of restroom access for truck drivers is something the greater public, I don't think, really understands or even knows about. When did this issue first fall onto your radar?
So my background is in engineering, and specifically I'm an industrial engineer. So I've spent a lot of my career thinking about logistics and transportation and infrastructure just to begin with, and was the chief operating officer of a basketball apparel and footwear company. So I spent a lot of time moving goods from one place to another and working with truckers and rail and that sort of thing. And so this is kind of not this particular issue of access to bathrooms, but the larger issue of the importance of our supply chains and infrastructure and labor issues has been something that I've been aware of for a while. It was brought to my attention when we were struggling, frankly, with recruiting truckers, and that this was one very simple and very pragmatic way that we could address that issue by trying to make sure that the quality of life and the working conditions were improved for our truckers. And so this particular piece of legislation would require retailers and warehouses and ports and marine terminals to be able to provide access to restrooms, and importantly, existing restrooms when they are, bringing their goods in and unloading them, which seems pretty reasonable.
My understanding is that your office also had some discussions with some female trucking groups about this specific issue. Mm-hmm. What were some of the takeaways, with females in particular that are dealing with this? And I know you mentioned about recruitment and retention in the industry.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of focus on getting more women in the industry. How has this issue been a deterrent?
Of course. So in addition to obviously myself being a woman, and as I mentioned earlier, an engineer, I'm also a veteran. I served in the Air Force. So I'm pretty used to kind of being in a place where there are fewer women than there are men. But
Sure.
As we all know, there are 51% of the population are women. And so it's really important when we're thinking about workforce issues and recruiting issues for whatever industry we're talking about, that we are inclusive of half of our population. And so, yes, women truckers in particular had brought this issue up, and not to get too graphic about it, but there are differences in the ways that men and women are able to use bathrooms.
Sure, of course.
And it was obviously a stumbling block for the access of women to bathrooms. And so that was kind of where some of this originated.
Yeah, and, that is something we certainly have heard quite a bit about, especially during the pandemic, with everybody across the board, for the most part, being denied restroom access while they're on the road there. I want to ask you about the process of this bill. This is a bipartisan effort. I think it's safe to say that you and your co-sponsor on this bill, Representative Troy Nehls of Texas, probably don't see eye to eye on a lot of issues. On this one, you do, obviously, and I think you kind of spoke to why that is, because it is such a common sense piece of legislation. The fact that this is bipartisan really, I think, speaks volumes these days, especially in today's Congress. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I come from a part of Pennsylvania. The district that I serve is actually 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, and 20% independent. I was raised by a Republican father and a Democratic mom, and I think it's really important to make sure that you are working bipartisanly to get things done and that are pragmatic and practical. And this is an example of that. And so, yeah, we look actively to try to find ways that we can move the needle on issues like this. The way that this works is in Congress is just like Schoolhouse Rock, if you guys remember that. There's a bill, we put it forward in the House, hopefully there's one in the Senate. we vote on it. Hopefully both sides, the House and the Senate, vote on something similar. If we do, then we send it to the president's desk for signature. In between all of that, it has to go through committees. If you remember, again, the song of our childhood. So right now where this bill is it is a bill Representative Troy Nels and I are supportive of. We're collecting bipartisan support from other offices, and it will go through the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for approval, and then hopefully for the floor for consideration on the House, and then hopefully again for consideration at the Senate as well. And so that's kind of how this, I'm just a bill, just an ordinary bill. This is an example of that.
When you first learned about this being an issue, how surprised were you that this is so prevalent in the industry? And also, how surprised have you heard that there's actually some opposition here? Because Representative Nels, I think in House testimony earlier this year, kind of alluded to there being some lobbyists that are opposing this. And this is so simple. There's no cost to it. It's just a simple right that, every driver, if you already have a restroom, they should have access to it just like your other employees or customers or whoever else you let use it. So I guess just tell me, your thoughts on how surprising, this issue is on every step of it.
If you are around Washington, as I am a lot, you are not surprised by much. But I think you're correct in saying that this is surprising that anybody would deny somebody access to a bathroom. And it's important to sort of back up a little bit because OSHA already requires businesses that have 15 or more employees to have both men's and women's restrooms already. So it's already, requirement. And it already has that if you are in a business with less than 15 employees, that you have at least one single unisex bathroom. So we're not asking people to spend any more money, businesses to do anything, as you mentioned, that would require an output of money or a burden on the business. And so it is sort of confounding. And sometimes I feel as though organizations sometimes are looking for, an opportunity to battle one another. This just feels like a no-brainer to me. And I'm really, really hopeful. Another important thing to know is that the current administration also supports this. And so this isn't one of those things where it's going to go to the president's desk to sign and it's going to get a veto. This is something that looks like it has all the earmarks of something that we ought to be supportive of.
I want to ask you because we've talked to lawmakers before, but we primarily speak to truck drivers, obviously, who are our listeners. And we sometimes badger them a little bit because we encourage them to reach out to the representatives to speak out against issues that matter to them, this being one of them clearly here. If you could speak to what it means when you actually get feedback from a constituent who opens your eyes to an issue like this, or maybe it's another issue out there, and just speak to the value of that, because I think hopefully people listening to this will maybe realize from what you say that, it is a valuable exercise. It is a little bit of work, but to reach out and make that connection actually does make a difference on issues like this.
It's a hugely important thing to do if you're listening to this conversation, that if this is something that matters to you or if other things matter to you and they are related to federal issues such as this one, that you do take the time to find out who your representative is. Depending on where you live, it's a fairly easy lookup, and there's a general hotline to the House of Representatives. But that you call your House of Representatives member and you express your interest in this piece of legislation, as an example, or any other one, because it's our government at work. I am a representative of the people. I'm a representative of my part of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, and I take particularly seriously the calls or emails that come from individual people who have taken the time to use their voice and not sort of hit reply all or some kind of, fill out a form that everybody else is filling out. If it's an individual outreach, it means even more to me. I also tell people that there is literally nothing wrong with lobbying, even though it has sort of a bad name, or advocating for yourself is a better name. Lobbying and advocating is really important. It's your responsibility as a citizen, and it's my responsibility to do my job and listen to the lobbying and listen to the advocating. Every day, all day, I have people in my office lobbying for things. As recently as today, I had a 7-year-old in my office worried about juvenile diabetes. I've had people in my office talking about the farming bill. I've had people in my office talking about space technologies. It's important that you give our office a call or any office of your representative so that we can know it's important. So back to, kind of the I'm just a bill. Every 2 years, 9,000 pieces or so of legislation are reintroduced all over again into Congress. And we cannot possibly, with our tiny little offices, keep track of all of them. And so we need you, people, to tell us what ones are important. And if you call your member of Congress and say it's important to you and ask them to support or sponsor it, it could make the difference of whether or not it happens.
States like Washington are already kind of addressing this issue of restroom access, obviously trying to get a federal solution to this. But do you also think maybe states like Pennsylvania, where you're at, that this is a possible avenue for them as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we actually just had a meeting before this phone call with an organization. We were talking about paid family leave. There are, I think, now 13 states that have put legislation forward successfully to help people when they have children or they have medical issues to be able to take time off and be paid for it. And so that's a way that we can accomplish things is state by state. But and you should, make sure you're lobbying or advocating to your state. But it is also helpful when we have a federal piece of legislation because it, kind of levels the playing field and it makes it easier for businesses that are, maybe all across the country to have the same requirements all across the country of them.
We've got a couple minutes here left, Representative Houlahan. I wanted to ask you here, as you garner and try to garner support there among your colleagues, you've got yourself, you've got Representative Nels on this issue right now. The conversations you're having with your colleagues there as you try to get support for this bill, are you getting positive feedback from them? I know in terms of getting co-sponsors, it's been a little slow so far. So I'm curious if you're getting positive feedback from your colleagues there and what exactly they're saying. Are you confident you're going to get more support here as this thing moves along?
Absolutely. There's some indicators of how this will go. We are getting very positive support and response. As we just talked about, it gets, reintroduced every Congress. So you have to basically start from zero every single time and go back out to your colleagues and ask them. As you can probably imagine, as we sit here negotiating the Defense Authorization Act of about $800 billion this week, bathroom access for truckers is not necessarily the top of everybody's mind.
Understood,
and so that's kind of why it's relatively slow in an uptick. But also importantly is, who is on the bill. You want to make sure that your people who are on the committee of jurisdiction are rallying for it, making sure that it gets considered for a markup. So there's a lot of politicking, frankly, that isn't just about whose name is on it, but rather about when will it be up for consideration. And we believe that it may be up for consideration in the fall in one of the markups in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So that would be the next step. And that's what's called regular order. It, goes through regular order and gets approved by its committee. And then we would start rallying and advocating for it to be considered on the floor for a general vote.
Politicking in Washington, D.C., I guess that makes sense. Representative Houlahan, thank you for your efforts on this issue, and I know I speak for a lot of people out there when I say that. And also thank you for your time speaking with us today. We know you're busy, so we do appreciate it. I'm sure Mark is
thank you
going to
very
say
much.
the same thing there as well.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Please have people give their representatives a call.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the easiest way to do that is to go to fightingfortruckers.com, where you can find a one-stop shop for reaching out to your representatives on this issue and many others that affect your livelihoods. We've got to take a break, but there's more Landline Now right around the corner. Stick around.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. Has your senator or congressman made you happy lately? Did the truck stop make you kind of sad? When they do either one, here at Landline, we have a special way of responding.
Ew.
We call it Roses and Razzberries. Staff writer S.J. Munoz keeps track of such things for Landline Magazine and for our program. S.J. is here now with the good, the bad, and the ugly from recent news.
Hello, everybody. We are back with another edition of Roses and Razzberries. I'm Landline staff writer S.J. Munoz, and joining me is Landline managing editor Jamie Jones, as well as Landline staff writer Ryan Witkowski. How are we doing today?
I'm fantastic.
You're doing good.
That was actually the first time I've heard the music for this. I like the Cool Island vibes.
Well, I mean, the smile on your face says it all. So I think we're gonna have a good run here today.
For this.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in with some raspberries. How about that?
We have to, because I think last time we just did roses, and I was really not here for that.
Maybe we were all in a good mood, so
No.
Okay, that wasn't it. So there's something else then.
She immediately dismissed that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with these raspberries for recently released research. That's easy for you to say. Recently released research that shows the cost of operating a truck has reached an all-time high.
Yeah.
No surprise, probably. But in its analysis, the American Transportation Research Institute estimated that the cost of operation for 2022 was $2.25 per mile. Not only is this the highest operational cost by ATRI's research, but it's the first time that it's surpassed $2 a mile.
That's a pretty big jump there. I mean, to go not just over $2, it's well over $2.
Well over $2, yeah. And fuel cost, again, probably no surprise, increased by almost 54% and accounted for the largest vehicle-based cost.
If it wasn't for the last few months, too, I mean, can you imagine what it would have been when...
Yeah, it's been bad.
Yeah, it's still bad, but it's gotten a little bit.
A little bit.
It's still bad.
So truck and trailer lease or purchase payments, repair and maintenance, and tires also saw a significant increase in costs last year. Tolls, as well as permits and licensing costs, decreased. Now, tolls... People were avoiding toll roads. That's why that went down. However, those two categories only account for 2% of the total cost of operations, according to the analysis. It's also worth noting that carriers with 100 or fewer power units had an average cost of $2.30 per mile, while the cost for larger carriers was $2.22 per mile. And we're hearing market updates where the load boards, the average cost per mile rate per mile is $2.29. You're barely clearing money right now.
So you're going to make what, 4 cents? That's good.
It's really ridiculous. The ATRI report showed that 31% of truckload carriers compensated drivers for parking, and that figure is down from 54%.
That's another bad movement in the wrong direction. That's a significant drop.
Corners, yeah.
Well, I guess not to be the bearer of more bad news, but some raspberries, but for the annual Women in Trucking Index report that showed the number of women behind the wheel declined, actually, from January through April 2023. The percentage of women in corporate management, board of directors, functional roles, and professional drivers are all tracked by and helped to create this index that's published by the Women in Trucking Association. In terms of over-the-road drivers, the percentage of women in this role fell from 13.7% in 2022 down to 12.1% in 2023. Lack of quality childcare, safety concerns, misperceptions of career opportunities, and an aging driver population all were provided as some of the potential reasons by this percentage decrease, according to the Women in Trucking. But on the plus side, despite this year's decline, the number of women drivers have shown steady growth over the past 5 years. Also, in addition, I guess that's what also means. More than half,
usually not always, but in this case, let's go with that.
More than half of the respondents said their organizations have a formal diversity and inclusion policy in place. Last year, that number was just 31% of companies that reported having such a policy. So, they're making some strides in that area. But yeah, the overall number of women in the industry declining by about 1% this year.
Well, and you're going to see that decline anyway,
just
because
across the board,
jobs are just shrinking right now in the transportation sector, because life. Everything sucks right now, it seems like.
Well, just when you have
just a ray of sunshine.
I want to see it more so just when
That's
you have
a technical term too, by the way.
a smaller percentage to start with. And it's
Right.
even more glaring just, in that way. But kind of along those lines, a new Canadian training program aims to do their part to increase the number of women, as well as newcomers and others from underrepresented groups in the industry. All right, these roses are for a $1.3 million investment that's by the Ontario government in what they're calling the Bridging the Gaps in Trucking program. All right, this is coordinated by the Women's Trucking Federation of Canada, and the project has set a goal of providing 54 participants with up to 200 hours of training. All right, participants in this program are also eligible for up to $4,500 in reimbursements for childcare, transportation, equipment, on down the line. So upon completion, the Women's Trucking, Federation of Canada is also going to work with graduates on job placement. So kind of going that extra step to make sure you're not just training, they're kind of making a career out of it, making a life
Well, if you're
after
going to make
that.
the investment, you might as well put them to work when you're done.
Sure, right.
Definitely. And then the first round of this, so it's in-person training too on top of that. So another bonus there. It's project's actually underway already. So kind of moving towards that goal of 54 participants and 200 hours of training.
It is interesting to see, too, like the contrast between what the issues were in the Women in Trucking Index and why they say women were falling out of the industry, and then you look at, hey, this is what we're going to be doing here.
This is
in
what
Canada.
we're investing in.
I know, it's kind of nice to see, I guess maybe them getting ahead of the curve rather than like the United States being behind the ball.
Well, on top of that, too, it's kind of focusing on, as a whole, also says underrepresented groups. So we're kind of, trying to hit as many groups as we can.
Well, and that Women of Trucking Advisory Board had their, third meeting recently. And so they're just continuing to kind of come up with new ideas to really help retain and also attract women to the industry. And so I wouldn't be surprised if something like this happens in the United States pretty soon.
Well, and I always think it's interesting, and I can say this because I am a woman, that they always latch on to child care as a hindrance for women. There's single dads out there that need the child care too.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So, that's
you're right
a hurdle.
about that.
There's a hurdle for many, many people, and they need to really think outside the box when it comes to child care.
Even just, having, a two-parent household, it's a task to find rides and get kids, for both of us. So it kind of fits to everybody that has children,
Well,
I think.
I will say, too, through at least the first 3 of those meetings, I think that maybe has been mentioned once.
That's
and
crazy.
Aside from that, the other retention issues are honestly issues that face every driver in the industry.
Just pay and things of that sort. Yeah,
All right, well, let's move on to some more. I'll get on the rose bandwagon, okay? So let's move on to some more roses, and these go to yet another selfless truck driver. John Huffman, a driver for Load One, came across a crash in the Knoxville, Tennessee area, and according to the Facebook post, Emily Brooke Tanner said the crash involved her daughters, and Huffman parked his truck and waited with the girls because she was more than an hour's drive away from them.
Didn't even know him. Just had to. He had to help. He saw the issue and sprung into action.
Yeah, he even went the extra step and provided them dash cam footage of the crash to law enforcement. But he had left the scene before Emily was able to get there. But thanks to the social media post, Tanner was able to reach Huffman and thank him for his kind actions. Huffman said in a reply to Tanner on the Facebook post, quote, "My dad raised me to stop and help when I see folks in need, and that's all I was doing." And it was funny, SJ, when you brought this one to the table for this edition of Roses and Razzberries, it reminded me I was going back to college and got caught in a snowstorm in a Mustang.
Not the kind. Not
sliding
what you want.
down a hill.
It's a perfect all-terrain vehicle.
18 years old, ill-equipped for the task, and there was a truck behind me, and I was so panicked that I just finally stopped on this 2-lane road, snowstorm on a hill. The dude got out, drove my car down the hill, went back, told me to wait, and then he followed me back to where I had to turn off to go to school.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been a soft spot when I hear these stories.
It's weird, too, because every time I hear one of them, the response is always, I'm just doing what I thought anybody would do. And I'm like, no, you're not doing what everybody would do.
Yeah.
Most of us are just going to keep driving and be a jerk.
You would.
Yeah. I guess maybe I would.
If the shoe fits.
Well, guys, I guess we'll stick with some roses as well. Love's Travel Stop earning some of those with the unveiling of new services along with a new Colorado location. truck washes are now available at Love's locations in Harrisonville, Missouri, and Pauls Valley, Oklahoma.
Who's Paul?
Yeah, so I was wondering. Yeah.
He's got a valley. 2 additional Arkansas locations are expected to open truck washes soon, and Love's anticipates open even more within the next 2 years. Shane Wharton, the president of Love's, said, quote, "The convenience of being able to fuel, wash their truck, park, and go inside all in one location is convenient and ideal for our professional drivers," end quote. Speaking of parking, at the new Parachute, Colorado location, it's off of exit 75 off Interstate 70, drivers can find 50 new truck parking spaces in addition to 7 diesel bays, showers, laundry facilities, and a cat scale, and also several dining options. The new Love's also creating 45 new jobs in the area and came with a donation from the Oklahoma City-based company to the Parachute Branch Library.
I think kind of said it all in that quote there. Like, obviously, we're aware, but a lot of people just overlook being able to do everything you need because you can't just take a truck anywhere, obviously, unfortunately. So it's nice that they're offered those services. Let's kind of stick with that truck parking theme you mentioned and deliver some more roses. Sorry, we're on a roll here. I'm sorry.
A lot of roses this week.
And these are for the announcement of federal grants that will go to truck parking-related projects. Among these projects is a $9 million commercial truck parking plaza in Caldwell County, Texas. This facility will have 20 short-term as well as 100 long-term parking spaces. It's also going to have security, restrooms, showers, just some other amenities also be covered by this grant. There's also a $10.5 million project near State Highway 65. That's in Louisiana. That will include 50 parking spaces for commercial trucks as well as 100 passenger vehicle parking spaces. And we'll also have 12 electric vehicle charging stations. So they kind of cover the gamut there.
Yeah, they really do. Ryan and I were digging into the cost of parking upgrades and parking projects the other day.
That was a rabbit hole I don't want to have to fall down again.
Oh, my word. It's just, it's a big investment.
Yeah.
So that's why we need that parking bill to go through and, another infusion of big money. So,
well, and I think the crazy part, too, at least the thing that I was drawing out of it was just how much it takes to create such, I don't know, a little small piece of parking spot, right? Like
it's not just leveling. There's a lot more
that
that goes into it.
You got to think putting lights in, restrooms, and all these other things that go along with it.
In Wayne County, Michigan, there's actually one more project to talk about. They're creating the quote. They're calling it the Truck Stop of the Future. This is through an $8.5 million grant. The site's going to offer a charging infrastructure for Class 1 through 8 vehicles with fast chargers, solar canopies, and also battery energy storage systems are included. I guess those were needed with
this. What does a solar canopy look like? I'm going to have to go Google that now.
I'm going to have to circle that, too.
All right. So I'm going to break up the rose party for one final raspberry, okay?
You couldn't help yourself, right?
Nope. Had to do it. Several states have recently authorized new or the additional use of traffic cameras to enforce speed limits.
Definitely raspberry worthy.
Yeah. Arkansas will now allow the use of these devices in work zones, although the legislation does give them the ability to do other locations. They're sticking with work zones right now. Colorado and Connecticut will now permit municipalities to designate corridors where speed or red light cameras can be installed. In Delaware, a 5-year pilot program permitting speed cameras in work zones has been created. And in Indiana,
all over the place.
But wait, there's more. The law authorizes state police to set up ticket cameras in highway work zones to enforce speed limits. So, I mean, I could probably keep going, but I think we're about out of time.
And don't forget Washington, Oregon. Yeah. I mean,
we'll save those for next time. Yeah, let's just forget. Let's move on from that. I thank you for joining us for this edition of Roses and Raspberries. If you have an idea for a rose or raspberry, please send them to roses@landlinemag.com or post them on the Roses and Raspberries Facebook page. For Jamie Jones and Ryan Witkowski, I'm S.J. Munoz. Landline Now will be back after this commercial break.
For Katniss accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
When you weigh on a cat scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive, Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount. Landline Now, welcome back. It's time for another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary.
We're counting down OOIDA's hits over the past 50 years, and sometimes that means looking back. Other times it means looking to present day for the battles OOIDA is currently fighting on behalf of truckers, and that's what we're doing today with the help of Jay Grimes and Doug Morris, both of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. We've got Jay here in Studio A. Good to see you, Jay.
Good to be with you.
And Doug joins us on the line from our nation's capital. How's it going, Doug?
Very good. How are you?
Doing great here. So today we're going to hone in on the truck size and weight issue. States, we see this from time to time, trying to up the limits, Georgia being a good example of late. Jay, let's start with you and I guess the reasonings that states give for trying to do this.
Yeah, and a lot of these efforts are pushed by large carriers, large shippers, and they kind of explain that, there'll be less trucks on the road, could minimize congestion, would reduce infrastructure costs, reduce emissions and fuel consumptions, and, everything's going to be all hunky-dory with these big, longer and heavier trucks on the road. But I think they make a lot of mythical claims that have been proven false in some of these states that have, increased their size and weight limits.
Yeah, and Doug, the mythical claims that Jay alludes to there is exactly what OOIDA brings up when they fight against these efforts. Can you talk a little bit about what the association or I guess how the association views this issue, in particular, why it's a bad idea?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is this. You're hauling more weight, and you're not getting paid any more money. And generally, it's a tax on your equipment and your fuel mileage. And basically, the national average of the score for bridges out there is a D at best, and then on the highways itself is a C. So you're just chewing up the road as you haul more weight. And I know a lot of our members are kind of for heavier weights, but bottom line is this: you're not getting paid anymore, and it's just taking profits out of your pocket with the fuel savings and taxing on your equipment, brakes, and trailers and the whole nine yards.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at kind of a cumulative effect of these changes in terms of them affecting everybody out on the roads in a bad way. Jay, we were all talking a little bit before we turned on the mics here because we have focused, I think, on Georgia recently and other states who have tried to do this. And again, OOIDA has fought back against those efforts. But this is something that we've also seen recently on the federal level as well. Talk a little bit about those efforts and I think maybe by extension here, what it would look like if size and weight limits went up across the country as a whole.
Yeah, and this is not a new issue by any means. And for years, our association has been successful in fighting back against a federal increase of the 80,000-pound weight limit, fighting back against twin 33s across the country. And, this Congress, we continue to see those efforts. There was a bill called the Ship It Act that touched on a lot of different issues, but included a pilot program of sorts, national pilot program to increase truck size and weight up to about 91,000 pounds. And that provision in the bill has been approved by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So it's made some progress, but still would have a long way to go to be federally enacted. And if that were the case, I think we would see a lot that infrastructure that we've gotten billions and billions of dollars in recent years to try and improve, a lot of those efforts would kind of fall by the wayside if you had bigger and heavier trucks in every state on every interstate highway, and that's only going to drive up costs not only for drivers and small businesses, but for the public as well in terms of trying to again come up with more money for road and highway and bridge maintenance.
And I think too, and both of you maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but when people make the argument for this change, they do bring up the driver shortage narrative, the myth, quite a bit in terms of, hey, we've got fewer truckers, so let's have the ones that are out there hauling more, right? That's also part of the conversation that people have when they're trying to push this idea, right? That's something that we do hear quite a bit. Is that right?
Yeah, you hear that quite a bit, and you hear a lot of claims about the driver shortage. But again, I think this is just another way for some of these large carriers and companies that are supporting these efforts to limit the amount of pay and rates that they're giving out and allocating to drivers there too.
And Doug, I keep bringing up Georgia. I don't want to pick on them necessarily, but they were, I think, the most recent state that looked at this issue and ultimately really watered down what they were going to do there. Are there other states out there that are looking at this issue seriously right now that you've kind of got your eye on as well?
Well, a lot of the Northeast states are looking at raising weight limits. We have Maine, Midwest states, they'll haul grain and agriculture products. We keep an eye on all this on a regular basis. I mean, we're part of a coalition. It's a coalition against bigger trucks, and it's a huge coalition. And we have law enforcement agencies on board. Pretty much every law enforcement association in the country is against bigger and longer trucks. So, that tells you something there. And I think in 2019, when we were pushing a lot of issues on Capitol Hill, we had over 1,000 local governments and state agencies and state governments sign letters against larger trucks. So it's a big coalition, and it's just the country's not ready for bigger and longer trucks right now. Just the infrastructure is not there, the equipment is not there. We see on a regular basis. I've seen here in Maryland where these dump trucks, if they're given an extra axle, out of state they're allowed extra weight, but these axles are like air axles, and they have like car tires on them. There's no additional braking or excessive weight that these axles can handle. So it's just a farce.
Yeah, and Doug, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier here, that there are truck drivers out there, obviously, who would benefit, right, from increased size and weight limits. OIDA, when it takes on issues like this, they've kind of got to take it on a case-to-case, case-by-case basis and view this from the perspective of all truckers. That is kind of a difficult dance to have, I would imagine, Doug, right? Can you walk us through what that looks like?
Sure. I mean, we actually have people on our board that would like to see heavier, they haul heavy equipment and like to see heavier weights and things of that nature. They wouldn't have to worry about getting permits and things. But the bottom line is this: we take direction from our board of directors, who are all truckers. They have, I think it was like 800 years of experience in the trucking industry. And bottom line is they know this. They know that if I'm hauling heavier, I'm not getting paid more, and it's causing problems with infrastructure and causing problems with maintenance and fuel mileage.
Jay, final thoughts?
Yeah, that's something we have to consider just about on every issue, but especially in this case, we see that if there were bigger weight limits, that would advantage the larger carriers and some of these corporate entities so much more than it would the small business trucker. And, we feel it would drive a lot of these small businesses out of the industry, and that's why we're fighting against it.
Jay, Doug, we've got to leave it there. It's been a pleasure as always. We appreciate you taking on these issues and, again, fighting for the rights of truckers. And thanks for walking us through this issue.
Sure thing.
Hey, thank you.
That was another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary. We'll bring you a new entry every week from now until the actual anniversary celebration.
And that's our show for today. We thank you for listening. Landline Now is back tomorrow with another one. We hope to see you then.
A
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.